Welcome back to the Hey Ed YouTube channel. I'm your host, moderator, and all-around nice guy, Edward Anderson, along with my really good Aussie friend, Rob Bruss in Cronulla, Australia. Hey, Rob, how you doing, buddy?
G'day, Ed. Looking forward to doing some more with you here, mate. Nice, good idea breaking these things up. Gives people a rest from my crazy ideas and your annoying voice.
Ouch. Yeah.
Who's watching these videos, man? They're as crazy as you and me.
Yeah, I know, right? But I love them. They're loyal followers, and
They're crazy like you and me. So how can you not
like you and me? Yeah, but in a good way, in the best possible way. Yeah. Okay. So in the last video, we had a very long, important topic about the state of the U.S. and global banking system that you really should watch. If you haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. You can. It'll be one of maybe I might have a link for it at the end of this video, but it's one that was part one. This is part two, and in this video, I want to segue a little bit into the subject of China. Now, with everything that's going on in our banking system right now, with the banks starting to unwind, it is not kind of hogging the airways, is hogging the news cycle. And there have been a couple of recent events that are important developments regarding China that we should be, our ears should be perked up over. But also in a larger respect, Rob and I do not think that China, that China as a subject is getting the proper amount of airtime. I mean, the focus right now, at least in America, it's all about the Ukraine-Russia war, and that one subject is kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the newsroom, the news cycle. But meanwhile, we got China. In my opinion, China is a bigger concern. The latest news is that you guys out there in Australia are going to get a couple of brand new shiny submarines.
Yeah, that should have happened like 25 years ago. We should have had these and we wouldn't be in this situation. But if it wasn't for the ineptitude of our politicians flip-flopping on what we should have bought, if I rewind the clock, and as an ex-Navy guy, this is kind of near and dear to my heart, right? So the guy that's responsible for the acquisition of the nuclear submarines here in Australia, his name's Vice Admiral Jonathan Reed. So I served with him. He was my torpedo and submarine officer on HMAS Melbourne. So I know the guy pretty well. And he's an ex-clearance diver as well. So he's like an SF guy turned surface warfare officer. And he made it all the way to the heights of the Royal Australian Navy. And he's a squared away dude. He was always a squared away guy when it came to submarines and, surface warfare against submarines. So no better person to actually be in that spot. And I'm sure he's got, hundreds of really good people in his team around him as well. But, if you rewind the clock to the submarines that we have today, the Collins class submarines, they're pretty lethal, yeah, and they are the apex predator in our region. But if we're going to go up against the North Koreans or we're going to go up against the Chinese, the scale of submarines that they have is beyond anything anybody can comprehend. So we need nuclear submarines to counter that threat. And back in the 1990s, when I was in the Navy, in the early 1990s, we knew that. We knew that the Oberon-class submarines that we had here in Australia transitioned to the Collins-class submarines that we now have. But those Collins-class submarines were built in South Australia, and they were built and there was problems the whole way through on this production line. So all things being equal, nothing is manufactured in Australia because for some reason, the manufacturing capability that we have is people just underestimate how hard it is to actually do it. But it turns out that they are going to manufacture them here. So is history repeating itself? It took the Australian government forever to get to the point to decide on Collins-class submarine to replace the O-boats. They finally did it. And then by the time the last one comes off the production line, the first one's due to be scrapped. That's how useless and inept the Australian government is. And that's not a reflection of the workforce. That's a reflection of the people that are in charge. So hopefully the lessons that have been learnt there from that have actually solved that problem. But there's been successive governments that have made mistakes. We were supposed to buy German subs, Japanese subs. Then we decided on the French ones. And then ScoMo threw out the deal and said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to make this AUKUS thing and go better and bigger. And we're going to have something that's proven technology, that's not made up technology. We're getting a French submarine that's supposed to have nuclear power, but now it doesn't have. Like, what? It's some Frankenstein version of a submarine. At least we're not getting the Frankenstein version of the submarine. That's a good thing, but they're just too slow to react. And you know what? If they had have got their act together in the early 1990s, when they knew the Collins class submarine was coming in, they knew that they were going to face these challenges, they should have been making the decisions then. We've seen that happen in the US Air Force recently as well with NGAD. So NGAD is next generation air dominance fighters. So NGAD is sixth gen aircraft that replaces Joint Strike Fighter F-35. What? Didn't we just deploy F-35? Didn't the Australian government just get rid of all its Hornets and get F-35? Yes. And now they're already talking about replacing that? Yes. Yes. Because these things only have a shelf life of 20 or 30 years. And if we end up in a conflict, we're going to lose a whole bunch of them. Then they're not going to exist. We need something to replace it. But they have, and it's a product of our society. There's such short timelines in somebody's career. By the time somebody makes it through the ranks and they end up into a position of senior leadership within a military, it doesn't matter what country it is in the world, they're looking over now to say, okay, my career is coming to an end here. I've gone as far as I can go. What jobs can I go to? So what they're doing is they're deliberately prolonging the acquisition process until they go and work in these contracting companies and get paid 10 times the amount of money to perpetuate these cycles and problems. So I'm hoping that Johnny Mead, who's in charge of all of this program, has understood all of those things. And he seems like he has. I've seen a couple of interviews with him and he seems like he's got that squared away. And if we end up with these American submarines, that's an enormous capability that we have, and we will be the dominant Navy in this area. Even if we've just got a handful of them, the fact that we've got them, we just outmatch and outclass North Korea. We'll outmatch and outclass the Chinese with what we have. And that is the thing that the Chinese don't really understand about our Navy. I've been up against the United States Navy submarine fleet before, and it is we didn't survive, and we didn't survive very long. And no amount of hunt for Red October strategies or tactics that we have. It's like asymmetric warfare. So American submarine warfare, and people don't know this because it's never spoken about, because you're not allowed to speak about it. But what I'm about to say is not classified information, and because it's just my lived experience, it's got nothing to do with weapon systems or equipment. What I can tell you is it's asymmetric warfare. I remember going up against American Los Angeles class submarines. That's how old I am. And that is hunt for Red October stuff. And back in the day, the guided missile frigate, an FFG that I was on, an Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate against a Los Angeles class submarine, that sub was like literally 10 generations beyond where we were. And nothing that we did could possibly save us from that thing. And so today, in the Virginia class submarines and the attack class submarines that the Americans have, the Chinese have no idea what they're up against. No idea.
Well,
because they don't exercise with the US Navy.
They probably have an idea.
No, they don't.
Oh, really?
They
Okay.
don't, man.
All right.
There's absolutely, they would have absolutely no idea how lethal that submarine force is. And if the Chinese think that they can get across the Taiwan Straits, the American submariners are going, well, that's what I do whenever I hear it, because we would just plink you out of the water one after the other from 50 miles away. You have no idea what hits you. And when you see a torpedo hit a warship, it splits the thing in half. So we don't need to fire. If I fire a harpoon missile at you, the chances of the harpoon actually stopping that ship is none. If I was going to use harpoon missiles against an American aircraft carrier, I've got to fire like 30 of them, because some of them are going to be intercepted. Most of them will be intercepted by the Aegis frigates around them and the destroyers. But if I got a harpoon missile hitting against an aircraft carrier, it's not going to do anything. But if I was going to sink an aircraft carrier, I only need 2 torpedoes. And I can do that from 50 miles away. That's the idea.
Yeah, but the Chinese have all those balloons.
Yeah, I know. They will see everything.
Okay. So
that's my high horse Navy thing going on there. Sorry,
I love it. Now, I want to flush out this idea of China in a shooting war scenario first, but then I want to get to my real contention is that I think World War III is already underway. It's been underway for several years, and China has designs of taking over the world, of conquering the world without firing a shot. And that's the program that I want to get into. But I do want to flesh out this idea of from a military perspective. And I want to interrupt this. I want to tell a funny little story because as you were talking, I was thinking about my son, my older son. He owns a
He was in the Navy
pizzeria.
too, wasn't he?
Yeah. He owns a pizzeria now in New York, in Brooklyn. So if any want to check out, Randazzo's Pizza on Ditmas Boulevard, walk in, say that you watch his old dad.
Your dad sent me.
Yeah, his dad sent me. He'll get a kick out of that. But he was in the Navy. He was an officer. He went to OCS, became an officer, and he was stationed in Japan. And so he was all over. He'd been to Australia. He'd been all over, and he had the surface warfare pin and he told me a story how he was on the bridge one day and he was the officer apparently in charge of the bridge, and one of their big guns it had jammed. And apparently, what had happened is a little like bolt or something got stuck inside the nozzle, and of course it jammed against the shell, so the shell couldn't leave because it was jammed in there. So they had to call over to the aircraft carrier for the DOD guy to come over. So they flew him over in a helicopter.
There's a live round in the muzzle of the.
Yep, right. Yeah. And so he's standing there on the bridge, overlooking the gun, and it was one of those big shell guns. And he said they looked at it and they're trying to figure out what was wrong. They finally realized what the problem was. He said, "Well, how do we unjam this thing?" So he said, the guy grabbed a big stick. And he went to the other end of the nut, and he's shoving the stick in.
A broomstick, yeah?
Yeah.
Give me that broom. Take the brush off the end of it.
Yeah. Listen, he said he was casually stepping back.
From the bridge, yeah? That 5-inch round's about to go off, man.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure they know what they're doing, but it's just kind of a funny story. Anyway, and Japan doesn't really have a navy, right?
The Japanese have gone ahead and decided that they're going to rearm. Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of legislation after World War II that only let them have the Japanese Self-Defense Force, which is really the same as the Australian Defense Force. We're not really an offensive capability. Only in the last really decade or so that we've really acquired high intensity offensive capability. But in the numbers that are so small, on the first day of the war, we're going to lose half of our capability. Make no mistake about it. We don't go into a conflict and not lose items. We've got the Growler Squadron, we've got a jamming capacity, and we've got the ability to lead a large force capability. But if 3 of those Growlers are taken down, we're in big trouble because there's only a couple of squadrons of them, right? And there's not that many jets. So the Japanese had the same theory, but it was legislated after World War II that they weren't allowed to have a mass buildup of anything. But they've since decided to spend more than 2.5% of their GDP rearming, because they recognize that the North Koreans are a problem, the Chinese are a problem, and they want to be as prickly and as nasty as they possibly can be. There was a whole lot of Tomahawk missiles sold to them recently as well, and the US don't go and sell TLAM just lightly to anybody. In fact, the Australian military only just announced recently that we were acquiring TLAM as well. So land attack and land attack strike capability is not something that we've ever really had other than from our Air Force. And that's because there's no direct threat in our region. Nobody from Indonesia is invading. Nobody from Papua New Guinea is invading. And certainly from Vanuatu, nobody's invading either. So we're an island in the South Pacific away from everything. But the Chinese don't have a blue water navy capability to project force at scale. And when you think about the buildup of, remember the buildup of Gulf War I? It's like this air bridge that was built. And in Gulf War II, same thing, air bridge built. And in Afghanistan, it was all that air bridge was built off the coast of Pakistan, and a helicopter airborne assault went in there, and they took the ground one piece at a time to get the follow-on forces to come in, and then there's the air bridge. The Chinese don't have that capability. They don't have the ability to move people at scale. And if they were going to come here, even if they brought 50 battalions of troops here, it's just not enough troops to actually do anything meaningful. And we've seen the Russians make the same mistake in Ukraine. No amount of troops that they put on the ground can actually help if you don't have the logistics to follow up and supply them. Now, if I was a Chinese general and I was using unrestricted warfare against Australia, I would just be using our open borders policy that we have here for import and export, and I don't mean for illegal immigrants, to build massive stockpiles of food and resources for the Chinese military. So when the Chinese come ashore, the first thing you do is go and secure those warehouses, and you guard those warehouses. Now I've got the logistics I need to actually move forward, because the Chinese know that here in our society, they could just roll us up because we don't have guns. In America, there's no chance that could ever happen because there's 10 guns for every person there. In Australia, we don't have guns. And the only way that we'd be able to fight against the Chinese if they came here would be with asymmetric warfare. And to think that they're actually not considering something like that, if a knuckle dragon infantry guy like me can think of that strategy, imagine what a real Chinese general can think of when they've got resources available to them and able to do it. This is unrestricted warfare happening on all scales, not just on a battlefield anymore, both economic, both military, cyber, space, philosophical, all of the Confucius institutes that we have in our universities, deeply embedding their Chinese culture and their language inside of actually what's going on. And I'm sure there's a lot of really good things that they do. And one thing I like to say all the time, because I know it's the thing that irks the CCP the most, is this: the Chinese people are not the Chinese Communist Party. Because the Chinese people don't give a shit about the Chinese Communist Party. What they care about is living a normal life and providing for their families. And the Chinese Communist Party are the gangsters with all the money, actually repressing their society from living the lives that they want to lead. It's a strange system. It's a very strange system.
Well, that doesn't give me any comfort at all, because they've had their chance to overthrow the freaking CCP overlords. So I think they've missed their chance. Same thing in Russia. You missed your chance to overthrow that guy now. So I have no hopes that there's going to be an upswell of the Chinese populists.
No chance.
Yeah,
no chance. If you read Mike Pompeo's book, he talks about Xi Jinping a fair bit, because he's the Secretary of State, right? So he goes back and forth and he's dealing with the Chinese all the time. And he talks pretty respectfully of the Chinese diplomats, because he's a diplomat and they're all very cordial and nice to him. But when he's forced to sit in a room with Xi Jinping, you can see him just like, oh my God, this guy, he just never shuts up. And he's actually not a very nice person, right? Xi Jinping, that is. So, and Mike Pompeo, he doesn't really say bad things about many people throughout that book. It's kind of like that adage: if you've got nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. But he highlights for you how antagonistic and how gruff the guy is, and how, this is how it's going to be, this is what it is. And he is the autocratic leader, and he is the leader for life. And there is no knocking that guy off his pedestal.
Did you ever see that video of Xi Jinping at one of their big CCP government meetings? I'm surprised that this video exists, but he's sitting there at the head table with the previous premier, and he
Hu Jintao, get out.
Yep. He gives a finger, and some guards come over and pick up that guy, the previous premier of the party, and walk him out.
I told you not to oppose me. Yeah, if you oppose me, this is what's going to happen. Off to the gulag for you, and I'm going to bill you for the bullet.
Yeah, if he made it to the gulag, he might not have made it out the door. As far as I don't know.
Yeah, and the guy's like probably 90 years old as well.
Yeah.
And they're dragging them out like that. Like, take it easy. He's an old man.
Yeah. So little picture and little insight to for me, I'm not so concerned about China as a military. I think they have much grander ways of, and much more subtle ways of conquering the world, and they've been doing it for over a decade now. Okay, so their two major initiatives are their Belt and Road Initiative, and that's the initiative that they've been using in order to take over ports and seaports and airports and major precious metals mines throughout the world. And I'm going to do a separate. For now, everyone just take my word for this, because I am going to do a separate video where I detail how this BRI program works. But for now, just suffice to say, but it's called debt diplomacy. What they do is they go to governments. They start with the poor countries, right, that have valuable resources that they want, and they offer them. And these countries can't afford to initiate any real big infrastructure projects. They say, well, we'll fund the project for you. We'll give you a nice loan at a nice low interest rate. But these countries have no money. They can't afford to make payments on that loan. So they basically foreclose on whatever equity. That's how they're taking over these. That's how they took over the major port in Sri Lanka. They went into Sri Lanka and said, listen, you guys are in serious debt. We're going to consolidate all of your debt and give you one big loan at a nice little reduced interest rate. And all we want is we want a 99-year lease on your port, and we want, including the 15,000 acres surrounding the airport. That's all. That's all we want.
So one of the things that the World Health Organization says to these poor countries, and you can read about this in the book called The Real Anthony Fauci, what they do is WHO, who is largely funded by Bill Gates, they say, we're going to give you money and we're going to fund your medical system. But before we fund your medical system, you must vaccinate your population with this drug. And I'm not talking about anything to do with COVID, nothing at all to do with COVID. This is before. Wait, this has been going on forever. Yeah. So since the WHO existed and Bill Gates realized that he would 20x his money in big pharma. So they would go there and they would say, you need to vaccinate your population for hepatitis C or hepatitis B or whatever they're doing to a level of 95%. Otherwise, we're not going to release the funding from the WHO to actually help you run your medical system. So then the governments go in there and go, oh, mass vaccination. Everyone gets jabbed for these things that they actually don't need because it's not really a problem in their societies. And then the WHO gives them the money. So that's the way that we do diplomacy in the West with these poor African nations. And that's the way that the big pharma has been experimenting on African nations for a long time. And when you discover that, you'll be alarmed and disgusted that Anthony Fauci was the head of that and responsible for all of that. It's unbelievable how bad it is. And the Chinese go there to these places. And that's what I'm saying. Just be careful of the debt diplomacy. It was like that. It's not like that anymore. They rock up and they say, hey, you need an airport? We'll build you an airport, but we're going to bring our people here. Yeah. We're going to bring our people with our workforce and build you the infrastructure that you actually need. Then you're going to lease it back from us. And we're going to work together to actually make it happen. So the difference between these African countries and the way they see diplomacy from us here in the West and the way they see the Chinese is that we go in and we give them handouts, but we attach conditions to their handouts. The difference between the Chinese and what we do is the Chinese don't give handouts. What the Chinese are doing is doing business with these countries. And when you think about it, that's exactly the way countries operate. We do business. Australian diplomats get on a plane and they go to China and they act on behalf of the Australian government and Australian companies to do better deals in China for Australian products and services. And Chinese diplomats come to countries and they try and do deals in the best interests of their nation as well. And that's not to say that nothing nefarious is going on in the background or that there's alternative motives in the background. But the reality is countries need to do commerce and business with each other to exist. And the difference between us and them is that we attach conditions to everything that they want. So if you want money, we'll give you money. But the African nations, when you read in Kevin Rudd's book, they don't want donations. They don't want a handout. They want to do business because business creates commerce and it creates cash flow and it creates tax revenue that the government can then use, corrupt or not, to feed their infrastructure and to feed the machine that government actually is. And if you look at the way that the Chinese are doing that diplomacy, they've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but a lot of what they do, and I'm not here to shill the CCP or the way that they do business, but it's way smarter than us going in there with the WHO and Bill Gates. He is the totalitarian technocrat. He is the real problem, without question. And that Tedros idiot.
I don't disagree with you, but in preparation for this interview, so that I don't look too stupid and to minimize my idiocy factor, I took.
You got your notes there, so we can riff on it?
I got my notes here. Okay, and I was thinking, the fact of the matter is that China now owns 6 seaports in Europe, 4 airports in Europe, including the Frankfurt airport, and they own the line that goes from Budapest to Belgrade, and then goes down to in the
Balkans.
Yeah, into the Balkans. So it gives them access to the sea route there. So
So let me juxtapose that for you for a sec, because I want to draw another comparison, because people talk about that all the time as well. And here in Australia, in the Northern Territory, in the port of Darwin, that was leased to a Chinese company for 99 years as well. And everyone's like, well, there's no other ports in Darwin. What if we need to put our military there? What if they want to bring their navy there? It's like, that's never going to happen. So it's like this. The comparison that I have, yes, they own the infrastructure, but do you know how much infrastructure America owns in those places as well? A lot. And Australia owns huge infrastructure in all sorts of countries around the world as well, particularly as it relates to mining, because that's our number one industry. And that's the thing that we export into other countries in South America. We cause all sorts of havoc and chaos and destruction, and all sorts of awful things happen as a result of all countries operating in other countries on planet Earth. And the way I describe it is like this. The Chinese may own that infrastructure. They have all of that infrastructure, but so what? And when you think about it,
okay,
hang on, let me close the loop.
Okay.
The American dollar is the world's reserve currency.
Yeah.
We know that, right?
Yeah.
The Chinese operate with Chinese yuan. Australia operates with Australian dollars. So I don't have US dollars in my wallet here that I don't pay with a $20 US. So what if I operate with that? So okay. I look at all of that infrastructure thing and think it's a bit of a news story, and it's a news story designed to rile you up. Because if you really knew how much infrastructure we owned in South America, we owned in Africa, and the problems that actually caused in those third world places, you'd be like, well, what if it, and if you compare them, if you compare what we're doing and the destruction of the environment and destruction of local industry, our jobs, their jobs, why can't the Chinese compete with us? What's wrong with that?
Okay.
Why does it always have to be adversarial?
That's a really good segue, because as much as I would like to push back on your argument about the real estate they've got in Europe, I do want to move on to the currency issue, because that is the real economic war that's going on right now between China and America, but not just China, and Russia and the BRICS nations, but primarily China is the big dog in this fight, as far as I'm concerned. Now, the West we are a debt-based society, so we're built on debt, and we're starting to feel the consequences is starting to come to a head. Our policies are unsustainable, and that is an actual analysis from our own CBO, that our current policies are unsustainable, and that the only solution is to print more dollars. That's the only way we can keep up with it. Unless we tax everybody 150% of their income, there's no way we can maintain our current level of debt. Russia and China, these guys have bones to pick with us. They both see us as a moral threat to them, not just an existential threat. But they don't like us. They don't like the way we do business. Russia, they're the most sanctioned country in the world right now, so they've got they're sourpusses, and I don't know. I guess you can't blame them in that respect, because you can give them that, right? And China, they don't like our defense of Taiwan. They don't like that talk. Both China and Russia, they see us as bullies. And our primary tool of bullying other countries to get what we want is our currency. So I think they see our currency, I think they see the US dollar as our Achilles heel. I think their laser focus is on taking down the US dollar in whatever way they can. And
hold on a sec there. Let me interject and see what you think of this, because I've been thinking about this a lot, right? So we've gone from the BRICS nations, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, to the BRICS plus South Africa, Indonesia, and there's a series of other countries in there as well, right? Some small African nations and South American ones too. So you look at that as the alternative, yeah, and you say that's they believe what they're doing is putting their chips on the table and saying that you can't eat debt, you can only eat commodities. You can only use fuel in your car for your ships, for your planes. We've got that. We've got that in spades. We've got commodities. So they're trying to be a commodities-based basket of currencies and countries where they know that the Americans are based on a debt-based society, as you pointed out so many times. So let me just kind of join the dots between inept and clumsy, stupid politicians back in the early mid 1990s in Australia that didn't have the foresight to get nuclear submarines or nuclear powered warships to stop all this bullshit from happening. What the BRICS nations are doing are looking, you can't deny that this is possibly true. And I would suggest to you that this is a large part of the reason that they've actually come together like this, because they recognize that the US economy cannot sustain as is. Sure, they don't like us. Sure, there's going to be a war. Sure, all of those things are true as well. But one thing that's never spoken about is those countries need to anticipate the end of the US dominance and the end of the US dollar. Can they do something to accelerate that? Are they doing something to accelerate it? Yes, and yes, they definitely are, right? But when you look at Russia as the most sanctioned country in the world, their economy is booming. So if their economy is booming on paper, does that mean their people are not suffering? No, absolutely not. It's a shit circumstance for them. It's terrible for them. But on paper, it looks really, really good for them. So when you got to be careful of saying that they're trying to bring us down, and they definitely are. That's probably a third of it. I reckon that the other 2/3 of the BRICS nations getting together to create a basket of currencies backed by gold. Yeah, the reason that they're doing that is because they see that the American economy is going to collapse and that's going to go away because it's a house of cards. You can't print your way to being the world's reserve currency. That's going to go away eventually. So here's the alternative. And they're creating an alternative for themselves to try and get ahead of this problem. I think maybe I'm giving the governments a little bit too much credit, because the Australian government couldn't even get submarines squared away for 25 years. So how are 5-10 countries going to come together to get a new economy and a new basket of currencies together? But that's the theory, right? That's the theory that they're trying to perpetuate. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of the policies, so much of this was so predictable. So the 2-year period there, right, during that little flu that we had worldwide, there's a 2-year period where we produced 40% of all U.S. currencies in existence were printed in just that little period.
In 2 years.
I mean, yeah. If you look at that M1 money, forget the hockey stick. It's straight up.
It almost goes back on itself.
Yeah, I mean, and so did these guys not go to those fancy business economic school to know what happens when you do that?
There's a country that's sitting in the middle of it doing actually exceptionally well. And when you listen to their politicians and what they say, you can't help but think, when you look at this war in Russia, you have to pick a side. I'm sorry, you have to. And if you say we should negotiate for peace right now, you're on Russia's side. Sorry. There's no way around it. You're on Russia's side if you say that. So bear with me here and I'll get to my point. Because if you say we should negotiate and the war should stop right now, you're on Russia's side because you say it's okay for another country to invade people and kill thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and to do what they want and take what they want by force. Irrespective of the circumstance, you're saying if we should stop and negotiate, then it should be there. And if you say, well, I don't agree with that, then just by association and default, you're on the Ukrainian side. When you look at what the Indians are saying, they're on nobody's side. And the Chinese have kind of said that as well. But we know the Chinese have been supplying the Russians with spare parts for their helicopters, for their tanks, and everything in between. We know that. That's unequivocal. And they've all but admitted that as well. So they're not supplying lethal aid to them, but they're certainly helping them. And China and Russia need to help each other to actually survive this war that's happening in Europe, and certainly the war that will happen in the Southwest Pacific as well. So the Indians are sitting in the middle of it going, well, I don't care. I saw a couple of interviews with some senior Indian politicians, and they're like, I don't care about the war in Russia. I'm not elected I'm elected by my constituents to actually do the best thing I can for Indian businesses. And so they're buying Russian oil hand over fist at reduced rates, producing the oil into fuel and selling it to the rest of us suckers over here, and they're sitting in the middle profiting.
Yep.
And when you look at that, whether you agree with that or you don't, it doesn't matter. The point is the Indians are looking out for themselves, and they're like, hey, those borders have been moving for the last 500 years. What do you want me to do about it? Half of our military is Russian equipment. We've got a lot of Russian equipment here. We need them. We trade with them. We do everything with them. And we trade with you guys as well. We need what you've got and you need what we've got. So we're not trying to say that they should or they shouldn't. We're not saying it's good or it's bad. We don't think that they should do that. But I also think that by trying to play a neutral stance, you're actually on the Russian side because you're condoning what they actually did. And now you're profiting from what they're doing. So is that good or bad for the Indian economy? Well, it just depends on your perspective as an individual. But I still think that the Indians are leaning on the side of the Russians because they're taking their oil. They're not making a stand by saying that invasion is wrong. You should stop that. You should get out of there. No country should invade another one. And you're leaving the door open to actually do that to Pakistan in Kashmir. And you're leaving the door open to actually do that with North Korea as well because you're part of the Quad. So, you know, it's a funny thing. They're kind of looking out for themselves, but by default, they can't not be on somebody's side. So they're on the Russian side, but we trade with them. And our prime minister was there the other day going, oh, the relationship with India is just as important as the relationship with China. But now you're negotiating with war criminals and people that are perpetuating a war. And we're perpetuating what? Like
the diplomacy is messy, right?
It's fake, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all fake. You know, but I remember, and I hope people will go. I know no one will, but if you want to, they can go back and watch a video that you and I did within days after the Russian invasion. Well, within days after the U.S. put on their sanctions and the ruble plummeted.
Yeah, crashed hard. Remember?
Crashed hard. Remember? And you and I were talking about that, and we predicted. There before it was announced, we predicted, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Russia starts going to the other neighbors, say, listen, we have all this oil that the West doesn't want anymore. How about we sell it to you, Mr. Pakistan guy, and you, Mr. Take your pick.
Iran.
Iran. How about we'll sell it to you at a 30% discount?
Yep.
The only catch is you got to buy it in rubles.
That's okay. We'll buy it in rubles, whatever we need to buy.
There you go.
We're going to sell it in dollars.
Sure.
That, by the way, is how the second Iraq war happened and how the war in Libya happened as well. Because those countries both said, you know, I don't have to, I'll take it in euros.
Yep.
Just the French. Hey, can we buy Iraqi oil? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
French francs or euros? No, francs. Okay, cool.
So that combined with the noises they were making about, we might back our rubles with gold. Between those two little noises, the ruble within a month is making
bounce back. Yeah,
not only bounce back, but made an all-time high.
Yeah.
So and you and I called it before it happened. You know, I'll bet. You know,
I remember those days. Putin said, he came out and said, I wish they would have done this years ago.
Yes.
Because they've been threatening to do it forever. And now it's happened because they've been anticipating and planning for that. You know, forget about their battlefield ineptitude. They're pretty good economically.
Yes.
They're good at making nuclear missiles and they're good at rocketry and space stuff. You know, there's no denying that. There's a lot of really good things that they actually do. And I'm not some sort of Russia bro here saying, you know, we're on the wrong side of history. We are on the right side of history. They shouldn't have invaded and they shouldn't be causing mass casualties like they are. And they're going to start a nuclear war. So, you know, there's all sorts of really bad things, but they're playing chess. We're playing checkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, you know, a part of that reason is that there's no accountability in our form of government. There's always a new idiot and another idiot, the next idiot, and they're all idiots. But in Russia, you got pretty much one guy making all the decisions. So there's consistency there. Right? He can. So there is, from a purely practical point of view, there is kind of something to be said.
The practicalities of it are right, but you know, ultimate power corrupts all.
That's right. No. I agree.
No question.
Agree. No question. No question. Whoever the economic advisor was to Putin back then, who came up with that scheme, that guy can run circles around whatever economists we have in charge over here.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah. It was brilliant.
Can you point to one thing that woman has done?
Oh, she loves yellow school buses. Oh, I love.
Yeah, but what did she do? I like school buses too, but what did she do?
She's all noise, the wrong kind of noise. That cackle she puts out all the time. It was an agenda thing. She was put there just because she's a woman and she's black. That's it. That was her entire. The only way she made it to power is she slept with the right people in California. That's how she.
There's one of you useful idiots that you're talking about, right?
That's right. And it's all about Biden is not he's not running anything. Sorry, people, he's not running anything. he's got people in the office next to him doing all the real work, and then they just give him a script, and he says, "All right," they roll him out, tell him what to say, and then he heads toward the door. All right, gotta go. Uh, what a joke.
I don't know if you spent much time looking at the Australian Prime Minister or what he does, but he is an absolute moron as well, and he is so. It's the same thing, man. It's like he's a meat puppet, and he's so clumsy and hopeless. It's just it's hard to believe that that's what the Australian public voted for.
Exactly. Really? The people
really?
People elected Biden. People elected Biden. People elected that guy. People elected Trudeau. Look, I'm sorry, folks, but at some point you gotta, you get what you buy. You get what you pay for. So part of me is feels really bad for the people in Canada when Trudeau goes into the bank accounts to steal their money. The other part of me says, hey, this guy has been an open socialist his entire.
What do you think was going to happen?
It's like these people who they know that the FDIC insurance has a limit of $250,000 on their account, but they had $10 million in their account.
What do you think was going to happen?
Yeah, they want to be covered for the whole 10 million, which is what happened last week. They decided to bail out everybody, which created a whole moral hazard, which is going to, I think it's going to have the opposite effect. They thought that they were putting a pin in this grenade, but what they did instead is they just made it a nuclear bomb instead, because now they just incentivize bad behavior. Well, hey, you bailed up them, you gave them all the money. So and they were doing this. Well, we're doing the same thing, so we expect the same courtesy when we need to get bailed out. So I'm a free market guy, and that means when you make bad decisions, you should suffer the consequences. There should be consequences. Anyway, so I'm going to take a little left turn there. Did you hear that Xi Jinping is on a plane over to visit Zelensky?
Yeah, wouldn't it be the ultimate kick in the teeth for the American government if he negotiated a peace?
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Boy, would that be? I mean, and what are we going to say? Well, no, we don't want them to have peace. We're going to look really. We are.
How bad. I would force a peace if I was Xi Jinping. Yeah, because I'm on a call with Zelensky by myself and there's no one else there. Yeah, if I was Xi Jinping, this is what I would say. Listen, mate, park it up now. Otherwise, I'm going to send my entire military over here and you'll be fucked. Park it up. Stop it. Enough.
Okay,
you've lost what you lost. That's it. And imagine Zelensky comes out and goes, whoa.
Okay, well,
he's going to go, no, NATO are behind me. I'm going to get. It's like, all right, if that's what you want.
So that's the stick. What would the carrot be?
There isn't one.
Really?
Xi Jinping doesn't use carrots, man. He only uses sticks.
You don't think he would arrive with a plane full of cash?
No.
For him and
his oligarch. All the corrupt Ukrainians are out, remember?
No, they're not. They're still, but they're still getting their wire transfers. The wire transfers go from the Federal Reserve to the Central Bank of Ukraine to, there's no accountability. I told you, we talked about this before. A lot of people are getting really rich off of this war. And I'm sure Zelensky and his immediate cadre of oligarchs, his version of oligarchs, I'm sure they're getting filthy rich, on this. For them, it's about the money. No, the way I would approach it is, hey, man, I'll give you $20 billion.
Oh, you'd try and do it economically, would you?
Yeah. Ukraine is notorious for their corruption. It's a national sport there.
I think Xi Jinping is all about the power, right? It's not about money or economics for him. It's about power.
Look, he's going to say, you know what? I'll give you $20 billion if you get on a plane by next week. And I want Kyiv, or I want Odessa, or I want just shave off Lviv for me. He'll get his part of his BRI initiative implanted somehow.
The problem is that Zelensky is so far in it up to his neck with NATO and our side with 50 other countries that there's nothing that Xi Jinping could say that would bother him, because he's like, you know what, man, I'll just call in the boys, the US Air Force, we'll be right.
This is about coming up with a settlement, right? I wouldn't expect Zelensky to turn over Ukraine to Russia, but I think it's all right. Listen, this because right now the stance in Ukraine is, what's their vision of victory? Number one, they want full compensation, right? full reparations, right?
And
Number
all
one.
of them out.
Yeah. Number two, they want all of their territory back, including Crimea. And number three, they want regime change in Russia. So
that's what I'm saying. That's never ever going to happen.
Course,
none of those three things will happen.
So you do say, oh, I'll get $20 billion, just drop those things and just do an actual negotiation. So, all right, we'll give Russia everything east of the Dnieper River. And
it's like the banking thing. Ed, this thing is unfolding in slow motion, and because it's unfolding in slow motion, people don't pay attention to it. So yesterday there was a Reaper drone that was downed by the Russian Air Force, and just a couple of months ago, maybe 6 months ago, the Americans changed the definition of recession. So the economy went into a recession. So they said, no, that's not a recession. Technically, a recession is something else, whatever it was. I can't even remember. It's so ridiculous. And now that a Reaper has been brought down, they've changed the language that they're using is try and not to inflame the situation. We're entitled to fly in international airspace. So essentially, you downed that aircraft for no reason. So is that an act of war? But the American Air Force generals come out and say it's irresponsible and it's unprofessional. No. They shot the thing down. Just because they didn't use a missile or guns and they rammed it, they caused the thing to crash. But you're not saying that it was shot down because that's too escalatory for you. Because as soon as you escalate, the Russians will escalate as well. Now, if the Russians have engaged with a NATO aircraft, an American aircraft, that's technically yesterday, the Russians attacked NATO. So should that trigger Article 5? It should, because it was in international airspace as well. It's got nothing to do with Crimea or Ukraine or anything like that. But for some reason, they're not going there. And now, whenever there's an ISR machine that's actually over that part of the world, it'll be escorted. And now, if the Russians want to engage with the F-35s that are there, they're going to get a bloody nose. And that's how it can escalate. And that's also how this whole thing could be a false flag and be fake as well. Where are the video? I saw some video. I saw the Russian Su-27 fly past the drone, but I haven't seen any of the American video being released yet. But the Russians instantly released that video because they don't care about the OPSEC or the bullshit that goes with it. So it's an interesting paradigm, man. And that's what I'm saying. Zelensky's there. He's not going to negotiate with Xi Jinping. The same as he's not going to negotiate with Putin, because all he wants is infinite resources that we keep supplying him until he gets those three things that you were talking about. But I don't think those three things are ever going to eventuate.
Yeah, you're probably right. No, I was just speculating about what could possibly come. I mean, it's a sad day when we are cheering against peace, when we are saying, no, I hope he doesn't negotiate peace with Zelensky. I hope that nothing, I'm sure that while Z is on his way, is on the airplane over to Kyiv, I'm sure at the same time that they're on the phone with Zelensky. You better not make any deal. I can just picture the conversation.
Of course, 100% they are. Absolutely they are. And that's the problem. The moral dilemma that you have is that you don't want to see any more people die on either side. And we've seen so much war in our lifetimes in the 20th century and with Afghanistan for the last 20 years. You're like, this is just all for nothing. All these people dying for nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine if they do secure a deal in the next couple of days. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome if they secured a deal because it stopped. But then all of those people that died are for nothing.
Yeah.
And war is a complete and total failure of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the moral dilemma that you face. You don't realize that that's actually an existential thing outside of you, that moral dilemma, because you know that it's all for nothing. And in the end, it amounts to nothing. And imagine if it ended this afternoon. All right, that's it. It's over. And then, so fast forward 6 months into the future, that's all forgotten.
Yeah.
So all those people that died, the families that were destroyed, the kids that were killed, the destruction of their economy, the destruction of their cities and everything like that, it's all forgotten. And you're just like, it's all for nothing, man. It's like such a failure of humanity. It's just a tragedy.
Yeah, and then there'll just be tons of documentaries that are going to come up in the subsequent years, unearthing a newest mass grave that happened way back when.
All for nothing.
all for
Why
nothing.
did they do that, for heaven's sake? Like, it's crazy. Boris Johnson stopped it all from happening because they'd negotiated a deal. And then Boris Johnson went, so no deals, man. We need to weaken these Russians. We need to get rid of that guy. And the only way we're going to do that is at the cost of your country, and your men, women, and children are going to be destroyed in the process. But don't worry, we'll support you for as long as it takes.
Like, on that real quick, let me ask you real quick on that topic. Okay, so we want regime change, right? That's the administration policy. We would like to see Putin gone.
How's that worked out for us?
Exactly. Well, if Putin's gone, what's next? So I heard stories that the likely guy who would fill the void is just as bad, if not worse, than Putin.
Yeah, they're all more hawkish than he is. Yeah, they're way more, and they're younger as well. So if they get there, they'll be there for another 20 years, the same way he is, because he changed the system to have unlimited terms. It used to be just 2 terms and then you're out. And he had 2 terms, and Medvedev took over, and then he went back. If Medvedev gets back in there, because he's the most likely person that would take over, he's way worse than Putin. He's 10 times worse than Putin. He's way more hawkish, and he's more likely to use nuclear weapons as well.
Yeah. So what are they cheering for? I got to tell you, I don't think the people really think things through a whole lot.
Best I can do for you is nuclear war. I know. It's like insane, eh? It's like just total, absolute madness. Total madness.
Well, that's why.
Yeah, there it is.
Why. You know how valuable this guy will be? A day could come where I could buy a nice SUV brand new with this guy.
I heard something yesterday that I'd never heard before, which is pretty cool. I want to ask you. I've been meaning to ask you about it. Was, you've heard the term peak oil before?
Mm-hmm.
So have we produced as much oil that we can produce? Have we dug it all out of the ground? No, I don't think so. Where it is at the moment, maybe. But if there's more exploration in the Arctic as well, there's a lot of oil and gas in that part of the world as well. And there's different places where we know it is, but it hasn't been extracted. So maybe peak oil has happened for the places where it's been refined and been dug out of the ground now. But has peak gold happened? That's what I heard yesterday. And there's a theory out there, that's what I was watching, was peak gold has actually happened. And so from here on in, because of the economy, because of the wars and everything that's happened, you're only going to see this thing accelerate.
No, there are deposits out there that are not tapped yet, but they're so much harder to get to than the
shale oil and stuff like that.
Right. It's largely depends on the price of energy, the price of oil and gas, because it takes energy to pull an ounce
dig it out.
To dig it out, right? So there's a point, there's a magic point, a magic number at which the mining companies will shut down operations because the gas of getting it out is just too much. It's not cost effective. So
they actually turn the mine off when that happens. I think it's $40 for shale oil, and I think it's something like $35 for normal oil that gets dug out of the ground as well.
Yep, that sounds right. And the idea that this 1 ounce of gold that I have in my hand here, gold is not native to planet Earth. Right? This literally comes from the stars. It was born in supernovas, right?
That's amazing, huh?
And then it eventually made it to Earth somehow. And I'm probably holding billions and billions of years worth of history in my hand right here. But just that alone, having the gold is a cool feeling. Boy, better than with my fiat currency prop. The fiat currency, that's garbage. It's garbage.
Toilet paper.
Not even, because not as comfortable as toilet paper.
If have you ever seen the TV show Narcos?
Narcos, no.
It's about Pablo Escobar. And so it's kind of like his life, and they go through that and how he got caught and his organization. Then there's a point there where the cops are onto him and he gets away with his family, and he's got these bags of money and stuff, and his family are like freezing cold. He's like, what am I going to do? Like the kids are there. He's like, no. So he takes the money out of the bag and he sets it on fire, and they're all like burning the money, like warming their hands up around that. And it's like, yeah, that's all it's really good for in the end. That's all fiat currency is. That just shows you that in times of crisis, and he was in a time of crisis, that money was worth nothing. It was actually better used as a commodity to heat his family so people didn't get sick and die than it was as a means of exchange like that. It was interesting.
Everyone, if you don't know this, let me tell you now. Fiat currencies, in my case, the US dollar, in Rob's case, the Aussie dollar, they're literally just pieces of paper. The only reason why they have any kind of barter exchange, because everyone agrees that it has barter exchange. But at one point in history, people used to use seashells for
tobacco leaves.
Yeah, tobacco leaves, for currency.
Yeah. And here in Australia, the first currency that we had when the first settlers came here was rum.
There you go. I remember you telling me that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it was booze.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that is a practical use, right? So that can
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bit tricky to carry around in barrels.
Like US dollars. So there are multiple reasons, more than one reason why you should get your money out of your bank. At least some of it. Okay. Because number one, they can take your money. They can legally steal your money. Because as long as it's in the bank, it's literally not your property. It's the bank's property. Okay, so that's number one. And number two, any money you have sitting in the bank is a depreciating asset. So you can kill two birds with one stone. Get some of your money out of the bank and then get some gold and silver. Don't be one of those people standing in line when the next big crisis comes along, because last week we've already seen it happening. In Europe, it is happening. We saw it happening last year in Sri Lanka, Turkey, Russia there for a couple of weeks.
Over the weekend, it happened in Paris as well.
Yeah.
It's not well reported in mainstream media, but there's massive protests there because of government austerity. So that's the thing. The biggest takeaway I've got from you that I haven't heard you say before, and you said it a couple of times today, is don't be one of those people standing in the line, because you know that this is happening. So do something about it, and don't believe what you're seeing out there. Take charge of yourself and take ownership and responsibility for yourself, so you don't end up as a victim of the system. Because all of those people there that were standing in the queue are literally victims of the system. And even if you manage to get inside the bank and you said, hey, I want to withdraw that 50 grand that's in my bank account, they'll go, no, because we don't actually have it. I promise you, if you go to the bank today and say, I want to withdraw $50,000 out of my bank account, they'll say, sorry, Rob, you can't do that. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. What do you mean? Isn't it a bank? Don't you have the money in the vault? They literally don't have that money sitting in the vault. They probably got 100 grand sitting in the tills in front of you. I don't know about you, but banking in Australia has changed radically. I remember as a kid going into the Commonwealth Bank in the city, and that bank is still there. And there's this big old-fashioned opulent building from the first settlers, right? And you go in there and there's these windows and there's all the security glass and all of that. But it was like something out of a Hollywood movie for me as a kid, I remember. And if you fast forward all the way to today, 40 years later, and I go into the bank, I walk into the bank, there is no cashier.
Yep.
And there's no fly-up robbery screens or anything like that, because there's a concierge that says, hello, how can I help you today? And I say, I just want to deposit some money, or I want to withdraw some money, or something like that. And the first thing the concierge does is walks you to the ATM. Yeah, we can do just about everything that you can do at the counter there here on the ATM. Let me show you, because the ATMs are pretty sophisticated, right? And then, have you got your net bank there? You don't need your card. You can go like blah, blah, blah. But then if you end up at the teller is sitting at a counter that's no bigger than their till. It's only as wide as their till, and the till comes in and out like that. And I've got $2,000 I want to deposit. Well, why don't you just do that through the ATM? Well, why can't I just do that with her? I want to talk to a person. There you go. And they walk you over there and do that. So they don't have $50,000 sitting out the back in the vault. She's barely got $10,000 sitting in the till there. So if you go in there asking for your money to do that, that's just not going to happen for yourself. No. So to your point, don't be a victim. This thing's unfolding in slow motion. These things are happening in slow time. So get ahead of it and stop yourself from getting...
But they've had plenty of time. First of all, I've been talking about this on my channel for a year now.
More since I've known you.
Yeah, right. Now that it's happening, I should have listened to that. They still had a week. Please put a comment below in the comment section. Did you reduce your exposure to your bank either before today or this week? Please let me know. And if you did you have any problems getting it out? Did the bank make it difficult for you to get it out? I'd like to know. Please share your story.
Let us know if you've got stockpiles of toilet paper and coffee as well. We need to know those things. They're important things, because we need to know who to come and get from. So Ed can trade his gold for your buddy paper.
I've got my toilet paper too, man. You know, I got a year and a half supply.
Oh, they're going to come and trade gold for you.
Yeah, look,
Takes a silver eagle for one roll.
People aren't laughing at me now for my toilet paper, my toothpaste.
There's inflation right there. 35 bucks for a roll of toilet paper.
Yeah, you know, I have not had to buy toothpaste or soap or toilet paper or dishwashing detergent or laundry detergent for several months now. People might laugh, but hey, I'm saving money and I've got peace of mind because
and you're locking it in at the price that you're paying for it there. As the price runs away with inflation, you're actually saving a lot of money when you're doing that. If you didn't have to buy coffee for a year because you bought a year's worth of supply, you'd probably save yourself like $100. And if you do that consistently over 10 different products, that's $1,000 you saved. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it adds up over time when you do that, and it's important.
Gold, I've got a program, 7K metals. You've heard me talk about it many times before. You know, it's my favorite way of acquiring gold and silver. You don't have to be rich to get gold and silver. Okay, you can just buy $10 worth of gold and silver if you want, and you do it with a click of a button. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to rely on assaying. You know, they hold it in vaults, ultra secure. You know, so so I'll have my email.
Much easier than crypto.
With in this case, with 7K metals, there's not a crypto in sight in the entire process. Yeah, right. Well, we went down several rabbit holes there, but you know, I love it. I think people are just gonna enjoy just the random talk from subject to subject with you, Rob. I don't think we'll need a part. Well, you know, there might be a part 3 and there might not be a part 3. I'll leave it for you guys to check out my channel to see whether there's a part 3 or not. But for the moment, I'll say thanks, Rob. Beautiful, always great to see you, man. And
let's wrap it up, mate. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Ed. It's always fun to chat with you, man, and to share these conversations, because I know there's plenty of other people out there that are having the same sorts of conversations or want to, and they don't have that outlet. So maybe if you're watching this and you made it all the way to the end of the video and you want to have these conversations, you can join us on a little panel here. We'd love to have some more people having a conversation. Get outside the echo chamber of Rob and Ed and bring some more people in. That'd be fun too.
All right.
Absolutely.
So Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, and Rob Bruss from Cronulla, Australia, signing out.
See you next time.
Copy that.